So now let's talk about section 2.2, which is talking about the production possibilities frontier. So what this is the PPF. Let's just make it shorter to make it easy. So the PPF is a diagram that shows the productively efficient combination of two products that an economy can produce given resources it has available. This is a great way to show opportunity cost. But more importantly, let me kind of explain what this is. If you were to look in your room right now, right, or in your house, or maybe even your city, right, how many t-shirts can you make? Not going outside your city, right, and like it has to be today, how many t-shirts can you make? And how many cookies can you make? So again, given the resources that you have in your city, right, total up how many t-shirts and cookies can you make in a day? So you have 24 hours to make as much as you can. That's kind of what the production possibilities frontier is trying to say. So with this, we have the United States, right? And they are able to make a lot of different things. But let's make it simple and pick two things, such as healthcare and education. So if we were to put everything dedicated to healthcare, right, we would have A. That would be the most amount of healthcare we got. But how many education do we have? And education would be like the amount of schools we have, things like that. So if we put all of our resources, such as labor, capital, like machines and buildings, or we are putting any land or natural resources or any businesses, entrepreneurship, if we were to put all of that towards healthcare, how many schools do we have? Zero. Now, the same thing, if we were to go all the way to F, which would be everything towards education, we would have zero healthcare. So that's where the production possibility comes in, is you have these options. We can have all healthcare, we can have all education, or we can have some sort of mixture in between. So the production possibilities frontier is kind of giving you a graphical representation about the different options that you have. So what does point A show? It shows if you did all of healthcare. What does point D show? Well, point D would show you that you're doing more education or more healthcare. Well, healthcare, so if this is 0, okay, this would be, pick a number, 5, that would be 10, that would be 40. So obviously at point D, we have more education than healthcare. So I said this is a great way to show opportunity cost because on this thing, you can choose any combination on here. A society could choose and produce any combination of healthcare and education on this curve, anywhere really. So it could be A, B, C, D, E, or F. There's no E, sorry. But it could choose any one of those. And the only way society can attain more education, right? How can you have more people working at schools, more buildings for schools, more land or natural resources for education? How can you do that? You have to give up some of it from healthcare. So we need some doctors or nurses. We need maybe a hospital converted into a school, something like that. So because we're doing more education, we have to give up some of the healthcare. And so that is where the opportunity cost comes in. Because we're doing more education, right? What is the real cost of the opportunity cost of the healthcare? Because we're doing that. So, governments do this all the time. They're trying to figure out, what's the best scenario on, doing more education or more healthcare. So that's what the production possibility is trying to do, is giving you just the possibilities that you have and pick one that is best for your society. Now, anything on this line here is your production possibilities. So this is how much you're possibly able to do. You can't go past there. Because remember, when I said how many t-shirts and cookies can you make in your city, right? I didn't say you can go to another city to get more resources. So this is your production possibilities. So I can't make more stuff because this is my possibilities. So anything outside of the PPF, we do not have the resources for that. So we would need to have maybe more people. We would need to get more land or some more capital, machines, things like that. We need something to make more. So anything on the outside is what we're going to call unattainable. So anything, way out here is going to be unattainable. And it could be, it could be here, it could be here, but the thing is that it's unattainable. Now, you're probably wondering, well, do we have the law of diminishing marginal utility? I know that's what you were thinking. But we're going to have something similar. It's going to be the law of diminishing returns. Because why do we do anything? Because we benefit from something. And that's basically a return. Like, what is returning back to me, such as a benefit? So the law of diminishing returns would say, well, I'm getting some benefit, but it's getting smaller the more I do it. So the law of diminishing returns looks like this. As additional increments of resources to producing a good or service are added, the marginal benefit of those additional increments will decline. Right? So because we're doing more education, the returns to the education, like the extra benefits you're getting, are very, very small. And the curvature, right? Curvature of the graph shows that as we add more resources to education, moving from left to right, so left to right, along the horizontal axis, the original gains are fairly large, but then gradually diminish. Let me show you what that looks like. So over here, right, when we go from B to C, so we're doing more education, right, we're having a pretty good increase here. So this could be something like the government is putting more resources in education. So now we're getting some doctors to be teachers, which is a great thing because, they have practical knowledge and then they could use that for the classroom and it could be really good. But then, the more stuff that you start putting towards education, like, how do you get much better than that, right? Like, what is the extra benefit that would be better than maybe using hospital equipment in your schools, or maybe having a lot of schools for everybody to where you would have 2 students in a classroom? At some point, you're going to put so much into education that you're not going to get much extra benefit from it. And sure enough, we can see that because look at from D to F, right? A much smaller increase there. So we went from here to here. So the more education we're doing, the less returns we're getting. So the law of diminishing returns. Now, what about the opportunity cost? Let's take a look at that real quick. Remember, because we're doing more education, what do we have to do? We have to do less healthcare. So this right here is our opportunity cost. But then when we are starting to go from like C to D or D to F, right, we're now having a larger decrease in the opportunity, a larger increase in the opportunity cost. So that's where it kind of gets tricky, is because we're having a little bit of benefit and the cost is greater. So, we really don't want to do that. But the main thing I really want you to understand is just the law of diminishing returns and what that looks like. Okay? So how is this different from the budget constraint? So a budget constraint is a straight line because this is just the maximum that you're able to afford with your income. And the PPF is going to show the law of diminishing returns. So, just like we talked about, where because of the extra benefits, it has to curve to show the smaller increases. Now, both diagrams do show the trade-offs, right? Because I do more burgers, I do less bus tickets. Because I do more education, I do less healthcare. That is true. So we both see healthcare on doing those. But the main thing was just because you have a fixed income and prices, and the other one is showing the diminishing returns. That's the biggest difference there. Now, everything on the line, A, B, C, D, F, all of those points are what we call efficient. Basically, that is your production possibilities. So you are doing everything you can to get to that possibility. You're not wasting any time, you're not wasting any resources in order to make the most healthcare and the most education possible. Everything on that line is your production possibilities. So that's the most you can do. You cannot do any better than this. Okay? So anything on this line is efficient. Productive efficiency is when it is impossible to produce more of one good without decreasing the quantity of another good. Right? How can I do more education? I have to do less healthcare. Such as B to C. Right? How am I able to do more education? I had to do less healthcare. So right there. That is productive efficiency. Now, the any choice on the inside of the PPF is productively inefficient because you could produce more of a good, right? And it doesn't cost you anything. Let me show you. Looking at R, where you're doing healthcare 1 or education 1, what is the cost of going to D, which is here, right? You get more education, which is fantastic. But remember, we have to give something up, right? No, because look here. Look straight across. See how H1 is at R and D? It didn't cost us anything. So R is what we call inefficient. Anything, absolutely anything on the inside of the production possibilities frontier is what we call inefficient. So you're not doing something well, maybe you're wasting time, you're not, doing everything you can to make more stuff. That is inefficient. And then finally, anything on the outside is unattainable. So anything on the outside is unattainable. Now, the main thing to remember here, anything on the line is efficient, anything on the inside is inefficient, and anything on the outside is unattainable. So, now, we have our different choices here, A, B, C, D, and F. What should your country do? That's the biggest question of all. And that's where allocative efficiency steps in. Allocative efficiency is when the mix of goods produced represents the mix the society most desires. It really depends on who your people are, your citizens, what your government thinks you want, things like that. So allocative efficiency is going to be looking at the marginal benefits and the marginal costs for society and what would be better for society. Maybe it's more healthcare. Maybe it's more education. So allocative efficiency is where the government's going to have to choose one of these points, whether it be A, B, C, D, or F, that is going to show you the allocative efficient quantity, what is best for your society. All the points on the line are productive efficient, but there's only one that is allocative efficient, and that really depends on what your country is. Okay? So, how much of a good a country decides to produce depends on how expensive it is to produce versus buying from another country. So we can use the production possibilities frontier in this country and another country. They have their own PPF, and we can look at both and try and figure out, well, if I'm making cars and you're making cars, who's doing it better? Because if they're doing it better, right, is it better for me to make them or is it better to buy them? Because if they can make it cheaper, what would I rather do? Right? If you go to HEB right now, okay, and you can buy a cookie for 10 cents, I can guarantee you it'd be pretty difficult for me to make a cookie for 10 cents. So guess what? I'm going to buy the cookie. So the same thing goes here, is when we're looking at the production possibilities frontier, we can also use it to figure out who's better at what. And if someone's better at it, if they have what is called a comparative advantage, then that country is the one that's going to make cars, oil, corn, something, right? And then we buy it from them, and vice versa. So a comparative advantage is when a country can produce a good at a lower opportunity cost than another country. Basically, who can do it cheaper? Anytime I ask you the comparative advantage, the question you're going to ask yourself is, who does it cheaper? And that's going to come back to the opportunity cost. So when we're looking at moving from one spot to another spot, that is the opportunity cost. Some factors for why a country would be having the comparative advantage: it could be the climate, it could be geography, technology, skills, things like that. That is where a lot of your comparative advantage are going to come from. So when we're talking about comparative advantage, let's look at two different countries here. Let's look at the US and Brazil. So the US PPF is much more flat than the Brazilian PPF curve, implying that the opportunity cost of wheat in terms of sugarcane is lower in the US than Brazil. Let me show you what we're talking about here. So basically, if we were both, doing this much wheat here, okay, and we both increase by 1, I'm trying to make it the same size here. So if we go straight up and straight up, it costs that much, and if we go straight up and straight up, it costs that much. So notice how Brazil, right, it has a much larger drop in the sugarcane than the United States. So looking here, right, the purple arrow is the opportunity cost. So the US would have a lower opportunity cost in producing wheat. Okay. Now, if we go the other way, okay, then Brazil would have the comparative advantage in sugarcane, because then we're going the other way, such as this. So now, if we were to go 1 up here, we would see a very little change. And if we were to go over here, we would see a little bit bigger change here. So again, right, that is Brazil has a lower opportunity cost in producing sugarcane. The main thing to remember here is you have a lower opportunity cost of making something. And the opportunity cost comes from the movement from point to point. So basically, if I was going from C to D, what is the opportunity cost? Well, I'm gaining education, but I'm giving up the healthcare. Well, what's the difference in this healthcare? Let's say it was 50 and 45. Well, the opportunity cost would be 5. So that's how we find opportunity cost there. Now, in economics, right, there's different economic approaches that we can take. Some people, will look at all this information that we just covered, and they're going to say, well, people, society, they don't act in that way, right, that fits in that economic way of thinking. And maybe, right, or you can just think about it. You could be doing it without even realizing. Why would you do anything? Well, because, I like to do something. There we go, right? You have more benefit than it cost you. So even though you may think it doesn't apply, it really does. Why were we trading with another country? Well, because they do it cheaper, right? Well, there you go. They have a comparative advantage over there. People, firms, and society should not act this way. So when we get into the should part, that's where it gets really interesting. Because I could tell you information, such as the U.S. population is 360 million people, and you really couldn't, disagree with me unless I got the number wrong. But that's a fact, right? That's how many people are in the United States. That is a positive statement. That's what it is. But if I were to say, what should happen is we should have more people making babies. Then you could say, well, Maybe, maybe not, right? You can disagree with me there because what I'm giving you is a normative statement. So based off of the positive information, I'm going to give you what I think. So I'm taking in the positive information and then I'm giving a normative statement. And so when people say, they should not act this way, right? What we can do is we can take in the information, such as the data that says, well, people usually will buy the cheaper goods on certain things. So that's the way it is. Now, what they should do is they should look for a higher quality good, or maybe they should look for more organic goods or things like that. That's the normative statement part of it. So positive statements, the way things is or are. Anytime you see is or are, that's what more of a positive statement, and something that's like should or could, that's going to be more of a normative statement. And with those, like the way people are, kind of reacting out of things, that kind of leads into the invisible hand theory by Adam Smith. The invisible hand theory basically, instead of like, trying to force someone to do something, imagine you're just like, you're trying to push someone without doing it. Okay. And so what's going to happen here is people are going to be self-interested behaviors. So basically, why do people do anything? Because they like it. So if you just let people naturally do what they want to do, that could lead to positive social outcomes. That's just the theory, right? Like if I wanted cleaner streets, and I'm guessing everybody would like cleaner streets, well, if everybody started wanting cleaner streets, well, then we would have less litter on the ground, because if everybody wanted cleaner streets, we would start cleaning up the streets a little bit more every day, and eventually, because of our self-interested behavior, we have cleaner streets. That's the invisible hand theory. So instead of like the parent coming down and saying, hey, clean the street, eventually people will start cleaning the street because of what they want to do. And that's the invisible hand theory. That's the basic idea about it. So that's the end of section 2. We will be moving on to section 3. Make sure you do the homework assignment and get caught up on all your other assignments there, and then I'll see you there.